Hi, good evening. My name is Richmond Santos. I'm here to present my Module 3 Delegation and Conflict Management for the Leadership and Management class. My topic's interpersonal conflict, bullying. Now, interpersonal conflict occurs between two or more people with different goals, values, and beliefs, which is linked to bullying. Uh, in this particular scenario, during a shift change, new nurse Michelle just finished orientation 2 weeks ago, and she's on her own. She's given bedside shift report to a seasoned nurse, Megan. Both nurses enter the patient's room, and Michelle introduces Megan to the patient. Mr. M. Michelle starts with telling Megan Mr. M's history and being a dialysis patient. Megan notices the patient's receiving IV fluids at 100 cc's an hour. Megan immediately cuts off Michelle's shift report and screamed, "Why is he getting fluids if he's a dialysis patient? Are you trying to drown this patient?" Michelle states that the physician ordered the fluids. Megan replied, if the doctor ordered you to drown the patient, would you follow those orders? All this was said in front of the patient. Megan discontinues the IV fluids and tells Mr. M that he does not need the fluids. Michelle was instantly in tears and leaves the room. It's a great example of bullying and interpersonal conflict. Now, here's some steps for conflict resolution. First is compromising. In compromising, you have a lose-lose situation and a win-win situation. Now, Megan and Michelle can both make this a win-win situation if they both agree that they're both in fault. During a lose-lose situation, it applies if Michelle feels that she was only following the doctor's orders and not at fault, while Megan feels that she was doing the right thing as she was trying to point out what was wrong. Basically, just opportunity to teach the new nurse. Another way of conflict resolution is competing. Now, during competing, one party presumes that what they want at the expense of the other. So it's a win-lose conflict resolution. Now, the loser of this conflict is usually angry and frustrated. Megan would win when competing, since she's the experienced nurse, and her rationalization for questioning Michelle was, like I said, a teaching moment in her eyes. Another conflict resolution is cooperating and accommodating. Now here, opposites. It's the opposites of competing. Basically, one sacrifices their beliefs and allows the other to win. It's a win-lose situation. Michelle, as the new nurse, would be the one that cooperated and accommodated in this situation. You also have smoothing. Smoothing, when one smooths the other party involved to reduce the emotional component. Managers usually use this to get the other parties to cooperate with the other party. One party compliments the other's party or agrees. Now, in this situation, Megan was asked by the manager to use soothing to fix the disagreement between the two nurses. Megan agrees and cooperates as the new nurse needs this to kind of regain confidence, as she just she's newly off orientation and she's just starting to be on her own. Another conflict resolution is avoiding. This is when both parties are aware of the conflict but choose not to acknowledge or attempt to resolve it. This typically happens in bullying situation where the nurses just try to avoid each other. The conflict would remain and eventually reemerge at a larger scale, when something else happens. Now, Michelle feels so offended of Megan calling her out in front of the patient, which is unprofessional, and forces her in tears. Michelle, at this particular scenario, Michelle actually avoided Megan a couple days afterwards. Now, collaborating is the ultimate resolution. The main goal would be a win-win solution. Collaborating is rare, but in order for Michelle and Megan to continue to work together, they have to put their differences aside and make it a positive work atmosphere. Mutual respect and open communication will bring these nurses closer and get past the situation. Different types of negotiation. Before, you must be mentally prepared. Review all the trade-offs, bottom lines, and hidden agendas. As the manager, you'd gather all the information of the conflict between Michelle and Megan. You visualize each person's perspective, organize how to start conflict resolution between Megan and Michelle. During the negotiation process, must remain composure. As the manager, you gotta use good communication skills and avoid destructive negotiation techniques. There's going to be a lot of emotions during this negotiation. It's going to be there's a lot of emotions expressed between Michelle and Megan. As the leader, I got to maintain my composure and avoid joining a particular party and focus on listening to both sides. I must be able to also counter points and express appropriate ways that Megan could have approached the situation a little different, especially with Michelle being a new nurse. Also, big thing is just to stress the fact that you can't do this in front of the patient. How it's just totally unprofessional. Now, after the conflict, both verbal and written agreement must occur. Megan must understand that bullying was used in this situation, and when she could verbally, agree and also written agreement must be signed to prevent future conflicts, as bullying is a big issue in the nursing world. Also, the manager must thank all parties and kind of tie everything in. Now, there's some of the destructive techniques that could be used. Ridicule is one of them. Ridicule kind of intimidates others. So once the manager notices that the co-workers are using that kind of destructive techniques, must remain relaxed and just use a non-threatening body language. Another destructive technique is helplessness. Once a manager notices that's being used, you got to secure adequate resources, and the managers must not lose sight of the original intent. Also, aggressively taking over. That's what Megan was doing in this scenario. Megan, as the experienced nurse, is often aggressive, taking over situation. And once the manager knows that, it must be stopped. Must stop negotiations. Take time to think it over. Now, I just want to talk about delegation. I'm going to tell you a particular scenario that I experienced during delegation. When I first transitioned from a floor nurse to a charge nurse, I had difficulty delegating tasks to some of my fellow nurses because they weren't used to me being in that charge nurse position. So they had difficulty accepting certain requests that I delegated. One particular scenario was when I assigned a small task to a nurse to check to make sure all compression devices were on patients and functioning prior to the next shift arriving. The nurse stated that that I can do that myself and refused to follow orders. I ended up bringing that nurse to the side, speaking to them privately, and I relayed the importance of mechanical devices, especially on our trauma patients, and to respect my new role as a charge nurse. The nurse then realized that I wasn't joking around and followed directions. Now, the 5 rights of delegation is the right task, right circumstances, right person, right direction, communication, right supervision. During the right test, make sure that the test is appropriate for the individual. Know the individual skill level, also their experience level, when delegating. Also, the right circumstances must be the right patient setting, resource, and factors. The right person. You got to clarify that the task is right for the person is fit. It's not you're not given such a big task for a new nurse. Be able to recognize that. Also, right direction communication, especially for new nurses. The objectives have to be clear. And let them know exactly what needs to be done and the expectation. As far as the right supervision, sometimes as the charge nurse, I have to be able to monitor and evaluate that the person is doing the task correctly, intervene when needed, but also, just kind of give them the autonomy and let them do it themselves to develop the skills and the confidence that they need as a new nurse. Now, some of the delegation errors are under delegating. Managers. That's when managers aren't confident with the individual and they're not sure if they can handle the task. When this happens, managers usually end up doing everything themselves. They overwork themselves, overburden the managers, and it's one of the main errors for delegating. Sometimes over delegating happens, and it burdens all the employees, especially when they're getting over delegated. This usually occurs when it's poor managers' use of time, and they're not organized, and they're insecure about their ability to perform a task. Sometimes when it's the last minute, and you try to delegate orders at the last minute, it's just too much for somebody to handle. Improper delegation is would also tie into that, delegating at the wrong time, or delegating wrong person, wrong reason, or a task beyond their capability. So I need to be able to assess how a nurse can handle a certain delegation, a certain situation, make sure that it's appropriate for them. Now I want to talk about creating a healthy work environment. Healthy work environment's very important. It's on a healthy work environment, it's clear expectations and communication is effective. Coworkers usually believe that it's fair and consistent. A lot of teamwork is seen, and staff needs and wants within the organization is seen. Some of the components of healthy work environment is skilled communication, true collaboration, effective decision making, appropriate staffing, meaningful recognition, and authentic leadership. Now, some of these qualities apply to my current job. To answer this question, define your present work environment. Is it a healthy work environment? And I'd have to say yes. My current job, the does a great job with skilled communication. We particularly use